Okay, continuing on with our chapter 44, population ecology dynamics. We begin with the topic again, continuation with demographics of population. One of the things we ended with was age distribution. Age distribution is the proportion of the population that falls into the various age categories. And there are three major age groups. When you look at age structure diagrams, you have the pre-reproductive stage, the reproductive stage, and the post-reproductive stage. At least three age structure diagrams are possible. You have those that show an increasing population. An age structure diagram could also indicate a stable population or one that is decreasing in size. Age distribution reflects the past and future history of populations themselves. So if you look, this is typically of what you would see. You can see the pre-reproductive ages. That would be before you're able to give birth to offspring. Your reproductive ages itself would be the period of time when you are able to produce offspring. And post-reproductive is when you no longer are capable of producing offspring. And then, of course, you could see in these age structure diagrams on the horizontal axis or x-axis, that would be indication of whether the population is going to increase, decrease, or maintain stable population size. Ultimately, what you do see, on one side you have males, on the other side you have females for each age structure population diagram. And ultimately what you see is you have a larger increase, larger population size of male and female for increasing populations at the pre-reproductive age. And ultimately, through time, you slowly start to see it decrease. For a stable population, it is pretty much stable throughout its pre-reproductive and reproductive ages. And then you start to slowly see a decline in the population during the reproductive stage, post-reproductive stage. But it's not a rapid decline, as you would see, for example, if the population size were decreasing. So you have, it's fairly steady across the board for all ages throughout the period of time. And then a decreasing population, you have very low births, and you have a very high post-reproductive age. So ultimately that would be declining population, typically drawn here as age structure diagram. There are two models for population growth. These necessarily aren't reproductive strategies. They are modes of reproduction for organisms. You have semiparity. Semiparity is when members of a population have only a single reproductive event in their lifetime. An example of this would be insects. A lot of insects have that one opportunity to reproduce, and after they reproduce, they die. Another example of this would be if you think of salmon. Salmon will return to their stream for breeding, and once the salmon have laid their eggs and they've been fertilized, the adult salmon would die off. So that's typical mode of reproduction called semiparity. The other type is heteroparity, and in heteroparity reproductive mode, members of the population are going to experience many reproductive events throughout their lifetime. This is typical of most vertebrates like humans. We do see it in shrubs and trees as well. Plants could, depending on the plant type and species, it could fall into either category, but we do see it with shrubs and trees where they have the opportunity to be reproductive throughout their life. Ultimately, in semiparity, you have adaptations to an unstable environment, and heteroparity, you have adaptations to a stable environment in which chances of survival of offspring are going to be relatively high. So here you can see the examples of each. On figure A, those are aphids that would reproduce. They have that one reproductive chance. And down B, you have a field of wildflowers. So looking at population growth models then, we could have exponential growth rate like in math. It would be typical of an exponential curve. Ultimately, the number of individuals added each generation increases rapidly due to the total number of reproductive females increasing. Biotic potential is having the full effect, and birth rate is at maximum during the exponential growth. There are phases throughout the exponential growth curve. The first part of the curve is called the lag phase. During the lag phase, growth is going to be slow because the population is very small. Eventually, though, that population keeps exploding, and that would lead to the exponential growth phase. In the exponential growth phase, the growth is going to accelerate depending on the number of individuals within that population. Ultimately, in reality, environmental conditions prevent exponential growth. Eventually, there are limiting factors that are going to prevent further growth, such as waste products that accumulate and food supply would run out. So as the population increases, so do effects of predation, parasites, diseases, and competition among members. So they will all So if we look at the curve here, here you could see this would be a mayfly. So you could see the generation, 0 generation, first generation, second generation, third generation, the population size itself, and the number of females in that population. So that would be looking at the biotic potential there. And ultimately here we have the number of generations here with the population in thousands. So you can see at first it's a very slow growth until you increase the population a little bit, and then once you get a decent number of individuals in that population, you start to experience that exponential growth curve, where you have R, which is the net reproductive rate. So the net reproductive rate here would be 2.4. So to calculate population size from year to year, you could use this equation, where n equals Rn1. N itself is the number of females number of females already present, and then you have the net reproductive rate. So in this case, it would be 2.4, and here you'd have the population size the following year. So you could plug in the values from up here and calculate the population size for each generation. The other type of population growth model is logistic growth. Logistic growth occurs when limiting environmental factors oppose growth. In this, you have a couple phases. You have a lag phase, exponential deceleration, and a stable equilibrium. So when we look at logistic growth, during the lag phase, the growth is slow because of the population being small. Then we're going to have a little bit of a growth rate accelerate there. That's during the exponential phase. And then we'll see where the phase is going to slow down. Growth will slow down or decelerate. And ultimately, what will happen is the population will stabilize. And this would be the equilibrium phase. So you have little, if any, growth. Ultimately, what you have there is the births and the deaths are going to be about equal. So this is logistic growth. And if we look at a logistic curve, here you could see typical of what that logistic growth curve would look like. So in the middle here, you do have the lag phase, where it starts off very slow because the number of individuals slowly need to increase there. And then you experience this rapid increase where you have the exponential growth phase, and then it kind of starts to slow down or steady out, where you slow that growth rate, and eventually it starts to stabilize itself or reach equilibrium, and that will carry out there. To calculate the population growth as time passes, you could use N over T equals RNK multiplied by what would be known as the effective carrying capacity on population growth. And the effective carrying capacity is K minus N over K. So K itself represents the carrying capacity itself. N is going to represent the population size, and R is equal to the rate of natural increase. And we'll look at that a little bit more. So what is carrying capacity? Carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals of a given species the community can support. So the closer a population size nears the carrying capacity of a community, the more likely its resources will become scarce and the biotic effects such as competition and predation will become evident. It depends on fluctuating conditions. So the amount of rainfall from one year to the next is a fluctuating environmental condition. For example, as we look at a simulation in class, we're going to study rabbit populations, and we'll introduce certain things into the population, such as another member of the group, and we'll watch how the population will increase, and then will slowly die off. We'll introduce a predator such as a wolf into the population and see the effects of introducing the wolf and what that will have on the population. We'll introduce food. For this case, rabbits eat grass, they're herbivores, or other vegetation, so we'll introduce a vegetative-like food, into the model and watch how the population would fluctuate through time. But ultimately, populations do stabilize around this thing called the carrying capacity, which is the maximum number of individuals of a given species that the community can support. And we'll look at how that model with the carrying capacity would look. So regulation of population size, ultimately, ecologists recognize that both biotic and abiotic play an important role in regulating population size within natural environments. These two things would be called density-independent factors and density-dependent factors. Density-independent is exactly how it sounds. The population density does not influence the intensity of the factor's effect. So population size has no influence on what will happen to the population or what will affect the population. For example, natural disasters. Natural disasters are independent, things that occur independent of what that population size is. You could have an earthquake at any moment, whether it be in an area where there is very little of a population of human beings, or you could have it in an area where there is a very highly or dense concentration of human beings within a given area. So that would be an example of a density independent. Density dependent factors, ultimately, as the percentage of the population affected increases as the population density increases. We see this with disease, competition, predation, parasitism. So the more members of the population within a given area, the greater the chance you have for the spread of disease, things that are going to affect the population, especially a disease that is communicable. Competition, as your population increases, you're going to be competing for resources such as food, shelter, predation. As the population increases, you have a greater abundance of predators that will grow with your population. So those are density dependent factors. So here you can see a low density of mice, the sharp-shinned hawk, very low population. But as you get a higher density of mice, you could support a greater number of predators in a given area. So life history patterns, especially those related to different types of strategists. Here we're going to look at a little bit of what an R strategist and a K strategist is. So life histories contain characteristics of a population such as the number of births per reproduction, the age of reproduction, the lifespan, and the probability of an individual living the entire lifespan. Each population is able to capture only so much of the available energy, and energy is going to be distributed among its lifespan, reproductive events, and care of offspring to show how that has evolved over time. Related species may have different life history patterns. Examples, toads versus frogs. So here you can see parental care among frogs and toads. Here you have a toad. The midwife toad, she carries all her babies on her back. Here you have the strawberry poison arrow dart frog, and the strawberry arrow poison dart frog will carry its one tadpole on its back. Here you have the mouth brooding frog. The mouth brooding frog will carry its young in its mouth. So those are different ways that they will care for their young. So life history patterns that are different. R is the rate of natural increase of a population. That we should know by now. And K is going to represent the carrying capacity of the environment. That you should know by now. So members of some populations are subject to R selection, and members of other populations are subject to K selection. Let's emphasize what these two things are. This is a concept that you should be familiar with by the end of this lecture. So R selection includes those that are opportunistic or R strategist organisms. So in this type of life history pattern, it's an unstable or predictable environment. Population growth is controlled by density independent factors. So the population size is low relative to K, the carrying capacity. So as an opportunistic species or an R strategist species, you're going to produce a large number of offspring. We see this with rodents, insects, some crustaceans. You're going to have a small body size. You are going to mature early in life, have a short lifespan. You're not going to invest much energy in parental care. Ultimately, you're going to have the offspring or lay the eggs, and then you're going to, this type of organism will not care for its young. They tend to be good dispersers and colonizers of new habitats. So we see examples of our strategist or opportunistic species are bacteria, some fungi, many insects, rodents, and annual plants. The reverse end of that for a life history pattern is a K selection or K strategist and equilibrium species. In this type of life history pattern, you're going to have stable, predictable environments, and the population is going to be controlled by density-dependent factors. So the population tends to be fluctuating around the carrying capacity. So equilibrium species are going to produce smaller numbers of offspring, maybe one or two at a time. They have a large body size. Maturation is going to occur later in life. They have a much longer lifespan. They are going to invest energy in parental care of their offspring, so take care of their young, unlike we see in our strategists, and they tend to be strong competitors. This is definitely what we see in long-lived plants, birds of prey, and large mammals, including humans. So we are a K strategist. An elephant would be a K strategist. So here you have a summarization. Dandelions in the field are strategist or opportunistic species. Small individual, short lifespan, fast to mature. Many offspring, little or no care for the offspring, and many offspring die before reproduction. So therefore you have an early reproductive age. Whereas the equilibrium or K strategist species are going to be larger individuals with a longer lifespan. They're going to be slower to mature, have few and large offspring, provide much care for the offspring, and most young are going to survive to a reproductive age, and they are adapted to a stable environment. Ecology focus, when a population grows too large, then we have things that are going to be introduced there. And we will also see this in the simulation. So white-tailed deer are prolific breeders. Female deer breed their first year, and once they start breeding, produce about 2 young each year of their life. A century ago, the white-tailed deer population was less than half. Today, it is well over 200 million. Natural predators of deer include things as wolves, mountain lions, which are now absent from most regions. So ultimately, as populations that are too large may suffer from starvation as they deplete their own food supply. For example, after deer hunting was banned in Long Island, New York, the deer population quickly outgrew the available food resources. The other thing that would happen, so we could see examples here, ultimately what would happen when you look at the population growth and you throw in a predator and you have the food supply and it just stabilizes there, because this would be a K strategist, you would see it fluctuate around K, the carrying capacity. So you have that population of organisms, in this case the white-tailed deer, would be fluctuating up and down around that carrying capacity curve or line. You'd see increases and decreases that fluctuate up and down along the K line for that particular population. So that environment is able to support that population size. Oops, sorry about that. Looking at the human population growth, the population for humans has steadily risen to its present size of 7.1 billion people today. Prior to 1750, the growth of the human population was relatively slow. As more reproducing individuals were added, the growth increased and became exponential. The number of people added annually to the world's population peaked at about 87 million around 1990. The doubling time of the human population is currently estimated to be between 50 and 60 years. That means doubling time every 50 and 60 years, the population is going to double in size. We do see 2 different trends. We have those that are more developed countries and those that are less developed countries. In more developed countries like North America, Europe, Japan, and Australia, we're going to see slow population growth. You have a higher standard of living, and you have a demographic transition. A demographic transition, decreased death rate, followed by a decreased birth rate that has occurred, and the population is stabilized. In less developed countries like Latin America, Africa, and Asia, a rapid population growth, you have a lower standard of living, and you have strategies to reduce population growth, such as family planning programs, social progress, which may reduce the desire for large families, such as providing education, raising the status of women, and reducing child mortality. You delay the onset of childbearing, along with wider spacing of births. If you look at the world population, here you can see the difference, highest growth and lowest growth. Here is less developed countries versus more developed countries, billions of people over a lifespan. Lifestyle in a city of a more developed country. Here's the lifestyle of people in a less developed country. Ultimately, honing in now, you have age distribution diagrams. Populations of more developed countries and less developed countries can divide it into the 3 age groups: STEM, pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive. More developed countries and less developed countries have different age structure diagrams. Many more developed countries are going to have stable age structure diagrams, and in less developed countries, they have youthful profile and are experiencing population growth. If there are more young women entering reproductive years than older women leaving them, the replacement reproduction will still result in population growth. Ultimately, you're going to have a 0 population is if there is no increase in population size. Let's look at this in an age structure diagram. Here it is. So pre-reproductive in light green, reproductive in yellow, post-reproductive in pink. You have male on one side and female on the other side. So the male is projected to the left, female is projected to the right. In figure A, this is typical of what you would see in a more developed country. So you could see that the reproductive years are between 20 and 24 starting and go to about 50 years of age, 49, somewhere in there, 44. Ultimately, you could see the millions of people throughout that particular time period. So this is typical of a stable population. Here you could see a growing population. Look at the amount of youth and the amount of reproduction, especially females during the reproductive years. So that would be increased population. This would be a stable or possibly declining population. Population growth and environmental impact. Environmental impact of a population is measured in terms of population size, resource consumption per capita, resultant pollution due to resource consumption. There are two types of overpopulation. You could have overpopulation due to population growth and overpopulation due to increased resource consumption. If you look, here is the comparison of more developed countries versus less developed countries. Population of the United States, Canada, Mexico, China, and India. Look at the oil consumption for those countries. Look at coal consumption for those countries. Look at the carbon dioxide emissions. So that is it for our chapter today. Thank you for listening. I hope you have taken good notes. Write down your questions, and we will discuss this in class.